Hello, beautiful souls. You have landed here on the SheBreathes Soul Stories podcast, where we ditch the highlight reels and like to talk about what is real. So, I'm your host, Jen Gulbrand, an author, coach, and fierce believer in the power of women's truth telling. Every week on the show, we dive into the raw, the real, and the revolutionary stories that really tend to shape who we are and how we show up in the world. Because when we speak from our souls, we set each other free. So I am delighted to be here today in the virtual studio with my guest, Erica Rooney. Erica is the founder of the Her Collective, also the author of Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floors, and a well sought after speaker. And I am just so honored to have her here on the show today. Welcome, Erica.
Oh my gosh, Jen, I'm thrilled to be here. I can't wait to dive in with you.
Good, good, good. So as a fellow corporate dropout and, big advocate for women's empowerment, I'm really looking forward to hearing your personal story. So what would you like to share with our listeners today?
Oh, girl,
There's so many stories, right?
there's so many stories, and I've played these stories over in my head hundreds and hundreds of times, and I even share it in a lot of my keynotes when I'm on stage, but I fell in love with women's empowerment when I got to the top of the corporate ladder and looked around and I said, this is it. Like this is all there is. Like what in the world? But I didn't know what to do with that. And I didn't know what to do next. But I knew that we needed more women in positions like that because I was also out there living in suburbia, being a mom, being a wife, and doing all of these things. And I didn't have a lot of people to look to. A lot of the women in my community were stay-at-home moms or they worked part-time jobs. And I want to be very clear, like those people are my tribe because I need those people in my life, you know?
Yes.
And I noticed that like there were those women out there, but they weren't around me. And so I said, okay, I need to build this community around me. I need to keep on going. But meanwhile, I am still all in my corporate job as a chief people officer. And I had a really great working relationship with a bunch of the executives, but then we had a little bit of a shakeup at the top and some people moved positions and changed roles. And I noticed that I was being mansplained to.
Oh, yes.
I noticed that the skills, experience, and expertise that I had been hired for, that I had also, oh, by the way, earned and worked my ass off for, were
Mhm.
being overlooked. And I really, it wasn't like one big sweeping thing that did it all in, right? It was all of these like death by a thousand cuts. And I went to bed on a Tuesday night thinking it was going to be a regular rest of the week. And then I woke up on a Wednesday and it was just another one of those little paper cuts. And I was like, what am I even doing here?
Right.
And I really started to think this was 1 month away from when my book was about to come out. And I remembered thinking, like, if I sit here and stay in this role and I continue to allow this, right, and to see it repeated time and time again, then everything in my book is a lie.
Yeah.
And I was really struggling with that because I liked that corporate paycheck. Like,
Yes.
let's be real
Yes.
clear. I liked those golden handcuffs, but they had gotten too tight and they had gotten too painful. And that day, I had a meeting with my boss. I remember I walked down the stairs because we were remote. I told my husband, I said, I think I'm going to quit today. And I think he about stroked out. And I did. I was like, I just knew deep in my heart that I could not do it. I couldn't do it anymore. And that was what really pushed me. But I really do believe that what is meant for you happens for you. And if you're not making the moves, then something's going to happen that makes you make the moves.
Right. That's
And that was my big push. And that's when I started Her Collective, which is my online digital community for women. And it's all about bringing women who are either just entering the workforce, re-entering the workforce, but they haven't climbed so far up that corporate ladder, but they're looking for that support. We bring it there through group coaching and monthly master classes. We talk about how to deal with mansplaining and all of that crap that happens in corporate America, but we support each other through community. And once that happened, and once I launched that, everything just started taking off. And I was going on stages and traveling all over the world and just really promoting this message of women's empowerment. And, I'll also sprinkle a little at the end and we can talk about it later, but I'm deep into AI now because I want women to lean into AI so that we don't get left behind again.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's the story. It's messy, but it's not like earth-shattering, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, there's just so many parallels, right? I have a actual statement in my book, very similar to what you just said, where I got to the corporate top of the corporate ladder and I looked around and I was like, now what? Like, this is not fulfilling my soul. It's feeding my family. It is not feeding my soul. And that moment of awareness, and of course, I'm, much older than you, but, and dealt with a lot of the things that you've talked about, even back when, we couldn't even speak about
There
them.
was nothing you could do about it.
The
Yeah.
talk about Me Too. I mean, I have stories, but before we even knew what that was. But the point is, you get there and you look around and you're like, what is this? What was this all for? Right? All these things you strive for all those years to get there and to feel sort of the sense of accomplishment, but it's all really focused on the external, how other people are viewing us and our contributions. And when you kind of get there and you look around and you kind of go internal and think about what, the real meaning behind it, you really start to question everything. And I'm
Mm.
confident that there are so many women out there who are, at that place or have been there and just, decided to make different choices for themselves. So this is a really important topic. And yes, so I'm thrilled to hear your story, and I know everyone's going to want to read your book if they haven't already. So tell us what happened next for you. Like you just took that experience
Well,
and
let me really tell you what
yeah,
happened
tell me
next
what
because
really happened.
this blew my mind.
Yeah,
So
let's go deep here.
I stepped out of corporate America and I remember sitting down at my desk for the first like Monday that was going to be my first like week off. And I've got all this anxiety of because I don't know what this looks like. I don't have a calendar filled with meetings. Like,
Yeah.
what is even going on? And I sat down and all of a sudden I got an email from someone who had been in my network that said, Erica, can you be in New York City on Wednesday? I need you to interview Sally Krawcheck, who is the CEO of Ellevest, which is a women funded investment fund valued over $3 billion. And
Yeah.
then the person going on right after you, who you can meet and you can give her your book if you want to, is Tyra Banks. Can you be there?
Oh, sure.
And I said, oh, as a matter of fact, my Wednesday is clear. And it's like that was the universe really telling me that, like, okay, you did the right thing,
Yes.
And that's not to say that I don't have anxiety and struggles about what this looks like for me going forward because I'm not making the money I made in corporate yet, right? But I do believe it's going to happen for me, and I'm just trusting. And trust was actually my word of the year this year in trusting in myself, trusting in my decisions, trusting even when I mess up and it all goes wrong, like you're still doing the thing you were called to do. And so it's really about leaning into that.
Absolutely.
And, we talk about glass ceilings and sticky floors. I'd love to just explain what
Please
my
do.
concept of a sticky
Please
floor
do.
is. Yeah, because a lot of people are like, she's got kids. Is there slime? Is there like syrup on the floor? The answer is probably yes, but
Yes.
that's not what I'm talking about. And for me, sticky floors are limiting beliefs and or toxic behaviors that keep you stuck. And
Beautiful.
so that can be anything from imposter syndrome or perfectionism to worrying about what other people will think. One
Right.
of my sticky floors was attaching way too much value to my paycheck and my job title.
Yeah.
I was very ego driven about those things and very proud of those things. And I think you can be proud of those things, but when you attach your inherent worth to
Absolutely.
those things is when it becomes a problem, right?
Oh, it's so
But
true.
I've also struggled with, first of all, every sticky floor in the book, right? But for me, other sticky floors are doom scrolling on TikTok when you know you should be sleeping or taking care of your mental health, right? It could be staying in a relationship that no longer serves you, whether that's a romantic one or whether that is a professional relationship, right? How many times have women stayed with friends who always one up them or put them down just because they've known them for 25 years? It's okay to outgrow those people. Those people can be keeping you small,
Yes.
right? And for me, one of my other big sticky floors was I loved way too much wine on a Wednesday.
Oh,
And then that
yes.
Wednesday turned into every day. And I was numbing out the stress so that I could just show up to a job that I wasn't getting any fulfillment with, that was draining me so much that I couldn't show up for my family. And so when
For
you start,
yourself.
or myself, anything
Right.
really.
Right.
But when you start digging into all of those sticky floors and you clean them up a little bit at a time, a lot of people say, like, great, do they ever go away? And I think the answer can be like yes and no.
Yeah.
I gave up drinking 3 years ago. I don't miss it at all. So to me, that one's gone, right? But if you go a little bit deeper and you say, well, do you still try to numb out with other things, right? Like I do still doom scroll on this phone all the time. That's something I could do a lot better at, right? I zone out a lot of the time with podcasts in my ears instead of just allowing the quiet to exist. So they ebb and they flow and they come and they go, but the more aware you are of them, the faster you can move through those things.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, everything you're talking about is the work that I do, trauma informed, teaching people about limiting beliefs, the stuck energy. I call it energetic weight loss. Like these things we carry through our lives that until we look at them and are willing to kind of do the work to unravel those belief
Yeah.
systems, then we get down to sort of the core of who we are, and we feel so much more in alignment, right? And I mean, the other point I wanted to make is as women in corporate, in these successful careers, we're socialized to sort of lean into our masculine energy, that kind of getting, I'm going to say it, getting shit done, right? Getting shit done and doing and moving and resisting and forcing. Not bad things, but if that's all you're doing, what happens, right? We dishonor our feminine energy, which is
Hmm.
just simply being and trusting and allowing and flowing. And so when you made that decision and you said, then all of a sudden things just started to fall into place, it was because you came sort of back into balance between doing energy and being energy. And look what happens when you do that, when you stop the forcing and the resisting, everything just kind of falls into place and becomes more clear. I think it's a really interesting concept for people to understand, that we have these different kinds of energy, all of us, men and women, and however we tend to, identify. But if you lean into one side and not the other too much, you get really out of balance and kind of you feel out of whack, but you don't know why. So kind
It's
of
so
staying in that space.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's so fascinating that you're talking about this because I go back to thinking about when I was in full-time corporate, but also starting my podcast, starting my coaching business, because I needed something to fulfill me and it wasn't coming from my C-suite position.
right.
And so I had started down that path. And I mean, as a C-level leader, you're working 80-hour weeks. You're traveling, you're doing all this. And I've got people around me going, and now you're starting a podcast, Erica? And you're like, what? Where do you have the time? What do you do? But that became what was lighting me up.
Absolutely.
And I had this hard and fast rule that, like, you don't work on the weekends, like, that's all family time. But when I started taking clients, sometimes I had to do them on the weekends. But again, I would have these conversations and I would just be so jazzed and so energetic. It was like I drank 6 Red Bulls or something.
Right.
And that's when I had that aha moment of like, oh, this is what it feels like to light up. Because talking about masculine and feminine energy, I had been in a mode of doing
Oh,
and conquering and next ladder, next ladder, next ladder, that I didn't even know what that felt like anymore.
yeah. I
So.
mean, I had a similar experience. And at the time that I left corporate, I actually owned my own business, but it was still, all the same kind of hurdles. And you find yourself compromising yourself. And that's when the red light goes off and you're like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not even, listening to my own inner knowing about who I am and how I want to be. And so, yeah, I think it's happening to so many more women. And I mean, it's good that we can talk about it because we can encourage people and assure them that there is, they can get back to themselves by doing work, like you said, that really lights you up, that
Mm.
you have a passion for, that is helping people and
So,
making a difference.
I want to ask you a
Yeah,
question because
sure.
this conversation just has my brain going everywhere. But when I think about like what you went through, what I went through, and just, chasing the wrong things, chasing the accolades and the success, the shoulds, how do we prevent the next generation, right? Because I have a 7-year-old daughter. I often think about like, I know she looks up to me. I know she mimics what I do, right? I see her. She goes all the time. I'm Erica Rooney, and this is glass ceilings and sticky floors.
Yeah.
But how do I prevent her from thinking, okay, these are all the things I have to do and just be her own person?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and we could probably have a whole nother podcast about that. So my daughter's 24, and oh my gosh, there's so much I could say, but um, she went through like she was a high school graduate during COVID. Everything was online, right? She had all this whole plan to go play D1 basketball because she's like 6'1" and very athletic and had college and the whole thing. And then the whole world, changed. And she went to college for like, I don't know, a semester during all of that when you couldn't leave your dorm room. Ended up coming home and being like, I'm questioning. And she had a very good situation there going to school to play basketball. And she ended up coming home and just being like, I need to pause. I need to press pause and rethink what I really want, who I am and what I want, and not what everyone else wants. It was like the
Mm,
proudest mom moment. As hard as it was for me, because, we too are kind of programmed. What do you mean you're not going to take that scholarship and go to college and play basketball, right? Right? Because we're going through our own programming. But now I look at her all these years later. She moved to a place that she loves, and that feeds her soul. She started her own business at 23 years old.
wow.
She's doing work she loves. She has a balanced life, in an environment that feeds her soul. And I feel like our youth are, coming out of COVID, they're looking at everything very, very differently. Our young adults. I work with a lot of young adults with, mental health challenges, and this messaging is so important because I think the world doesn't look the same that it did before that. And I think they're really questioning everything, and what used to be the path that you take is not meant for everybody. And my daughter never went back to college, didn't take advantage of the opportunities, but turned her life into something that mattered to her, and she's doing great. And but it was like you know it was a challenge for both of us, because while she was going through her pause, I was also trying to figure out, how do I support her being who she is, and not worry so much about these things that we're taught to worry about. Well, how will you support yourself, and what do you mean you're not going to have a college degree, and all those, things that go through our head. And meanwhile, 2 years later, she's like knocking it out of the park, so happy, mentally stable, mentally healthy, physically, like things are good. So I do feel that when we parent our children and the next generation, these messages of be true to yourself, don't inherit limiting beliefs that we've passed down to you by mistake, unprocessed
Hmm.
things. Make, focus on your own health and mental health and physical health, and spend some time reflecting on who you are and what matters to you, not the rest of the world. And I think that message is becoming much more relevant for our young people. But I also think as parents, it's the biggest and best gift we can give our children is to remind them to be who they are and not who they think we all want them to be, if that makes any
Mm.
sense. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that perspective. And it's something I think about often, especially being with a 7-year-old. So,
And a girl, like,
and a girl.
they
Yeah.
face all those, other pressures that, yeah, that the world puts on women. So, but you're being such a role model for her and showing her, how to be true to yourself, and how to take your gifts and support other people. So I'm pretty sure she's going to be just fine.
Well, listen, I tell people all the time she's either going to run the prison yard or the country
Yeah.
one day. I'm
Yeah.
not sure which at this point. It could go either way.
I love that. That's so great. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So tell us a little bit about, so I know from personal experience, writing a book about your own life, it's a fabulous experience, but it's challenging at times, right? Like, how far am I going to go? How much truth am I going to share?
Mhm.
How will people perceive me, when they read my story and see some of my vulnerabilities? So what inspired you to take that leap of faith and share those deeper parts of yourself and your story in your book?
You know, I never thought I'd be an author. That was never like on my bucket list of things to do. But as I became a speaker, that really became an important credibility asset. And I realized that I'd had my podcast, Glass Ceilings and Sticky Floors, and I had hundreds of episodes where they were easily categorizing these sticky floors into, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, all of that. And so I was like, wow, I've got all these interviews and material, and I should do this and I can talk a little bit about my story. And as I started to do it, that's when you kind of start to go a little bit deeper. And I was very mindful, because all of my parents are still with us, that a lot of what I was writing about could be felt a certain way, right? Or I was very concerned that they would tell me that's not how it happened. And I didn't want to have to defend my work,
Right.
because that was my lived experience. And then also going deep into the chapter on alcohol and being very open about that. I felt it was my responsibility to do that, but that was probably one of the harder parts of it for me because it was so rooted in shame.
Oh, yes.
And I put it out there, and all of my parents wanted the copies and they've all ordered them. And so I just kind of like sat there for a little bit, like
Mhm.
definitely anxiety ridden, like, because of course they're judging your work, you're judging that. And my mom came up to me and she said, a lot of what you put in your book, she goes, it it really validated what I thought you were experiencing.
Really interesting.
And yeah, and it gave me a new perspective on it too, because obviously I know how I look at my daughter, and reminding myself that that's how she looks at me, and that we still have a very tight relationship. And a lot of it was unpacking because I grew up in a divorced household, right? So she had all of these limiting beliefs and worries about, okay, I divorced her father. What does that mean? Like, how am I messing my child up in that way? And so when she could read about how I processed that, but then also at the same time see me in my present day,
Yeah.
mentally healthy, happy with a great family, like I think for her, it was almost this full circle moment of like all of those worries that we have, all of those sticky floors from that generation. Like, okay, if we trust, which there's that word again, if we trust it
Yeah.
will all be okay, then it will all be okay. And my mother's favorite quote has always been like, it's always okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Right. Yeah.
And it just speaks to itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had similar concerns, writing about things that even people closest to me weren't aware of, didn't know it happened to me, but also my own like childhood stuff, right? And you have that moment when you put it out and then you're like, you like hold your breath. Like, how's everyone going to react? But what I found to be so um poignant is just how liberating it feels,
Mm.
to put it out there, and because then you're like, you release all that shame and those limiting beliefs and the chains that kind of the things that you've suppressed all these years, and you just put it out there. And I don't know, I found it to be extremely freeing. And not only did I feel like I was healing my own wounds, but again, the people who read your story and resonate with it, they also experience healing. And your mother, that was like, it sounds
That
like
was a gift for
a
her. Yeah,
really,
that was a
right?
gift for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
I will tell you, I don't know that I felt that same level of freedom at first.
right.
I think I feel that now, but I think back then I felt such a responsibility to share my truth because, as you say, like when you share your story, other people like hear it, it heals them. I had been healed by other people's stories. So I felt that had I not done that, had I not included those pieces of myself, then it would have all been a fraud at some point. It would have been this facade. And I had just gotten to this point where it's like, no, like this is who I am and this is me and it's messy and there are parts I'm ashamed of, right? And there were pieces that I wish I could have done differently, but like
Yeah.
here it is.
And that's the thing, these things that happen to us, the choices that we make, they don't define us, they inform us, right? So that we can move forward and do better and be better and yeah, I mean, I think it's just part of the human journey. And talk to us about how the act of sharing some of these personal stories contributed to your own sense of power, empowerment and
It's,
sense of self.
yeah, it's so interesting because in the beginning, I was very reserved about talking about a lot of my own sticky floors because I felt the need to be the perfect mom, wife, and all of
Right.
that. And I would only share it where I saw fit, right? And now that I've put it all out there in a book that is purchased by anyone who wants to figure it out, it's like there's no point in keeping any pieces of those of me quiet. I could. There are plenty of people out there who haven't read my book, right? But why not make them more comfortable? Why not get those authentic and vulnerable connections made, especially in like today's world where we're so disconnected and we're always on our devices? And, I can't tell you just how easily it can tear down walls for people in a good way. And again, like you hold all the power when you are comfortable and confident in your story. I remember before when I did not have that confidence, I didn't have any power, and then it's always that anxiety like, oh my God, is anybody going to find out? Are they going to know this about me? Who's going to see this crack in my facade? And now it's just like, here I am.
Right? No, it makes such a difference. I know. And I really firmly believe that when we share these raw, vulnerable stories, right? When we find the courage to do that, it sort of fosters this deeper sense of connection, compassion, and just empathy, and which leads to a very different level of community. You had mentioned that just a moment ago. Like you people start to feel a sense of belonging when they feel less isolated and less alone. So sharing our stories, it's like super powerful, right? And
And
that,
also, how about hope, right? Like sometimes some of our darkest moments then that people are going through,
yeah,
we've already been there
right,
and we're on the other side of it, right? I have a very close friend who is going through it right now and I, found out about what she was going through in a very public way, so it's everywhere, so she can't
sure.
hide it.
So hard.
And I just came over to her house immediately and I said, let's talk. Let me tell you about my life and my story. And I just let it all out. And she was like, number one, oh my God, Erica, never would have guessed it. And
Right.
she's like, but that gives me so much hope because, like, I see you, you're a badass, you're doing all these things.
Yeah.
Like, if you can go through that and be where you are now, like, okay, I can get through this too. So you're offering those people who are in those moments of despair and anxiety and shame and all of that, and you can show them like that there is hope. And I think
Yeah.
the reason so many people don't get started is because nobody thinks anybody else is going through
Oh,
it, right?
100%. 100%. And I think people we tend to feel like we're safer if we just kind of hide under the facade that you had mentioned, because
Yep.
if nobody sees the cracks, right, then we're accepted and we belong and all of these things. But you can't do that forever. And I think when we can move some of that aside and be more real and have these deeper, more, I like to call them conscious connections with other human beings, it just makes, I don't know, it builds more resilience and more compassion and a kinder um, way of being with one another, and the world certainly needs more of that right now.
Well, let me tell you about this awesome interaction that I had today, since we're just talking about authentic connections and stuff. So, I had a man named George Bryant on my podcast a couple weeks ago. You can go listen to him. He has this awesome podcast called The Mind of George. He said, you got to talk to my buddy TJ. I'm like, sure, I don't know why, but I'll talk to him. So, I got on the phone with TJ today, and TJ is a coach. He mainly coaches males. And I mainly coach female. So we were just kind of talking about the different things. And I don't even know how our conversation took this left turn, but like we went real deep real quick. We were talking about how I attached my worth to, my paycheck and my title. And like when I left, like, this is how I felt. And like, oh, that like we trailed it all the way back to like my divorced parents and the need to feel loved. And like,
Sure.
This was a 30-minute conversation with this
Love it.
person.
I love it.
And it was just, I found so much more value in that conversation than I have in so many other conversations that I've had for, 1 hour every week for the last 6 months,
Right.
you know? And it depends on if that person is as healed as you are. I'm
Mhm.
a, One of the best quotes I ever heard when I was going through it is one of my friends says, Erica, you have to remember that not everybody is as healed as you are. And
Right.
I was like, oh, light bulb moment there.
Yeah.
And when you can find those people who are at or around your level, like this TJ dude, like you can go deep, go quick, and cut the fluff and
Yeah.
get to the core of the human,
Because it
which is
feels safe. Yeah. Because you
yes, which
know
is
that
what
it's
we all want.
absolutely, it's what we all want. We need to feel safe. We need to feel a sense of connection and community. I know. It's so great. Oh my gosh, we could talk for an hour about all these things, but I want to be respectful of your time and of our listeners' time. So, what would you say to other women who are out there listening to this podcast and are thinking, gosh, I have a story. I have a story I want to share, but I'm just not sure, how to go about it. How would you encourage them? And why would you tell them it was a good idea to just let it out there?
Well, first of all, I would say I don't even think you're dreaming big enough.
Yeah.
I really like that's the piece of advice I would give the younger me is I don't is you need to dream bigger.
Yeah.
And part of dreaming bigger is sharing that story with other people because I am a big believer of being a woman who lifts others while she rises,
Absolutely.
right? And sharing your storytelling, right? Sharing your lessons learned, your all the deep darkest parts of you, like that's what everybody needs to see, right? We got your Instagram reel, we got your LinkedIn highlights, like we know all that good stuff about you, okay?
Right.
Which keep telling me,
Yeah.
but show me the real you,
Yeah.
right? Like, what are your biggest fears? What keeps you up at night? Like, and why? Because here's the thing, like, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's actually something to be super
Oh,
interested in
yes.
because we all have these different lived experiences. But, take that story, dream bigger, and think about the women and the people that you are lifting while rising.
So it's so beautiful. I thank you. That's a beautiful message to leave everyone with. Thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you to learn more about you, your work, where you're speaking, your coaching opportunities?
Oh my goodness. First of all, thank you, Jen, for that. But you can find me in every social media platform. My second permanent address is on LinkedIn. That's where I do a lot of my
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
So hit me up on LinkedIn, Erica Anderson Rooney. You can find me on my webpage, which is ericaandersonrooney.com. And if you're interested in joining the coaching program, Her Collective, you can go to joinhercollective.com. But I would love for you to hit up the book, hit up the podcast, and just connect and tell me you heard me on this incredible show. And like, let's chat.
Let's do it. I love it. I think we're going to have to book another episode and just talk about shame and limiting beliefs and go from.
Oh, girl, we could go deep there.
I know,
Yes.
I know. Well, so thank you so much. I'm deeply honored to have you here today. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And if you have a soul story that's been waiting to be told, this is your sign and this is your time. We have a space here for real women and real truth. So just reach out to me and send me a message and tell me that you want to be a guest on this show. And I would be honored to hold the space for you as well and for your voice. So thank you all for being here. Until next time, have a beautiful day.